Right. Who was here last time? And who's here today but wasn't here last time? And who was here last time but isn't here today? All right, you know who you are. You know who you are. I have quite a bit to do, but that's okay. For those of you who weren't here, there is a video. I'll probably repeat myself a lot, which is my privilege. It's great. When you do your own talks, you can say whatever you like, really. You know how everyone says you should really pay attention to your audience. It's all rubbish. You're in charge. Say whatever you want, seriously. That's my honest advice. And in that spirit, I'm going to conduct a completely unethical bit of market research on you, violating all good data ethics. I'm looking for a name for my new podcast on data analytics. So before we start, I'm just going to go through some candidates and see which ones you like. How's that? Where are we? See how organized I am? That's the other thing. Important point. Data engineers, very goal-oriented, very organized people. Data scientists, chronic ADHD. It's not a bug, it's a feature. I'm serious. It makes you more creative, and it makes you more open to surprises and interesting things that you didn't know to look for. Engineers, they know what they want to build and they build it. Data scientists, well, we're there to look for the new stuff. Where do we look? I don't know. How are we going to look for it? We'll work it out as we go. What business activities does it imply? Well, let's all find out. And you think I'm kidding. These are actually really important points, and these are very challenging points relevant to the conversation we're about to have. And I have to say, unlike the last talk, I want this one to be more of a conversation. I'm in a generous mood, so anybody who wants to strangle me, yes, Demeter, already you want to strangle me.
A comment since you put like data science and engineers, which is the application of that.
Demeter, make it quick, mate.
All right, Edward Deming said it's not about doing the best, like data scientist, but knowing what's best. So my question is, where is the data philosophy here, knowing what's best?
I'm actually going to mention philosophy, and I'm going to mention philosophy in a lot of context, but it won't be the philosophy you like. I don't have a high opinion of the sort of philosophy you like. You probably don't like the sort I like either, but I'm a big fan of logic and analytic philosophy. I'm not a big fan of continental philosophy.
If you have enough questions, why?
Okay, I didn't really want to go there in this talk, but I would say if there's one piece of advice I want to give anyone here who's actually seriously involved in analytics, and when I say seriously involved in analytics, I mean actually looking at data to actually derive insights and do the analytic stuff. And by the way, writing a whole bunch of code to pump data through a machine is not necessarily analytics. So there are people in this room who think they work in analytics, but they work in analytics the way lab technicians work in science. Seriously. If you're cleaning test tubes, you're not a scientist. And if you're writing Python code to create data pipelines, you're not necessarily a data scientist. Seriously. And if you want to be a data scientist, learn to look at data. Don't pump data through machines. Just pump data through machines. Data scientists do pump data through machines, but data scientists also look at data. Technicians only pump data through machines. Bear that in mind. But the important point, the very important point, since we're going there, is, I mentioned this in a class I just ran recently. I run a data literacy class. So this is the potted 45-minute version of what the heck is data literacy. Well, it's now going to be 50 minutes because I have to address this. But no, thank you. Good question, Demeter. I'm kidding. Great question. Always love to have you in my presentations, and I always appreciate your questions. And it's good to argue with you, and you ask very good questions. You should give your own presentation. But what I wanted to say was, and this applies to anyone who is a data scientist or is a data analyst or is an aspiring data scientist, and as you'll see in my talk, what we consider to be the work of data scientists, I strongly believe and hope to convince you, is going to be everybody's work. And that is to support critical good decisions. And the first question you should always ask is not why is a question you should ask, yes. What problem do I want to solve might be a question you want to ask as well. I'm not saying they're bad questions, but the question you must get to, you might not start with, but you must get to, is what decision am I supporting and what makes it a good decision? So here is something else that I didn't want to be part of this talk, but it's something I will defend to the death. The thing that makes analytics, And by the way, precludes a whole lot of stuff that looks like analytics, smells like analytics, involves huge budgets, lots of software and PhDs, but to my mind is not data science, it is not analytics. It's when you're doing all that fancy stuff, but you're not doing it in the service of making critical, better decisions. And what's interesting is how much of the analytics that is being done, measure it as a proportion of dollars spent, measure it as a proportion of roles hired, measure it as any proportion of the vanity measures that people use to say, isn't analytics great? We used to spend this much money on it 5 years ago, there's this much money spent on it. It was in this many organizations, now it's in this many organizations. We had this many data scientists, now we have these. These are all bullshit metrics because they're nothing about how much value it delivers. They're all supply side metrics, they're vanity metrics, yeah? They say nothing about the delivery of value. And what's interesting is that these metrics often also hide the reality that only a subset, and often a minority, of those dollars and of those people actually have anything to do with supporting good decision making. Now, in my data-driven decision-making course, there's a few courses listed there. In the data-driven decision-making course, I actually talk about canonical use cases where I talk about all the other ways in which data does get touched, or data-ish people like us get hired for reasons that are either trivial, compliance, nefarious, proving a point after you've decided what you're going to do, or downright unethical. By the way, I'm not saying compliance shouldn't be done, but I don't consider compliance to be analytics, because you don't do compliance to make a decision, you do compliance to make someone go away. Thank you for opening that can of worms, Demeter, because these are some of my favorite topics. But you've distracted me from a much more important thing, which was to find good titles for my podcast. So here's some. One is, my nickname is Moose, and there's a very long story, and it involves an ex-girlfriend from 2 decades ago, and I don't want to go into the details. But Moose versus AI, there is no AI in team, empirical conquest, principal components, or the singularity with CYN, as in cynic. Some of my friends jumped in. Someone actually liked weapons of mass distraction. I'm tending towards big data Moose, actually.
Can you put them explicitly and visually?
I suppose I could, but no. Theoretically, yes. Actually, no. I haven't connected my computer. I'm not doing slides. So yeah, I do slides occasionally. You're usually not served well, because when I don't do slides, I actually improvise and I actually answer questions people have. Anyway, if anybody wants to talk to me about the podcast, I'd love to get people's input. I'm really at a loss. There were some really interesting ideas. Someone just suggested supervised learning, or actually Mark suggested cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissident. I like cognitive dissident. Thanks, Mark. So that's a good one. Anyway. There is a podcast coming, I'm even now recruiting poor Richard here. He doesn't know what he's getting into, but hopefully he's going to help me edit it and occasionally be a guest star. This will be fun. Right, let's do the talk. We said that we're going to do the talk. Let's do the talk. So last time I drew this picture for you of a future where things have changed. Things are very different. And there were some forces at play. What were the forces? The forces were automation / offshoring / commoditization. Basically, anything that can be turned into an app or a very trivial blue-collar job or something that someone half a world away can do for a tenth of your salary will go in that direction, particularly if there's like a little economic crisis to give it a push. That's just the way efficiency works. How many people here are involved in RPA projects? Okay, 1.5. Well, robotic process automation. It's a thing. We are automating what we can automate. Now, what's interesting with robotic process automation is not only does it take away jobs from process workers, it takes away jobs or radically changes the roles of the people who would normally be managing those processes. Because you suddenly find that people whose main skill is people management are suddenly having to retrain as, or more realistically being replaced by, people who are systems administrators. And the cut and thrust of human interaction and politics and needing to influence people and so forth is suddenly replaced by objective, transparent performance metrics. Yeah? So all the politics goes away, objectivity goes in, and guess what? That level of management is suddenly measurable. Whoever manages these people is very different to whoever managed that layer of management before, and so on and so on. So there's some very interesting cascade effects that are coming just from the automation side of things. We also talked about the fact that it doesn't just affect the hierarchies; it also affects peers. So I'm sure people will say, well, what about intermediaries? What about go-betweens? What about data translators? What about business analysts? And I'll go, yeah, okay, fine, but you're going to need intermediaries between much smarter people than you do now. I'd say it's a very different kind of intermediary. So I don't know that any kind of job is safe. And the other point I made is that we're living in a world where all the prestige of being someone who makes things happen is disappearing. Being able to make something happen used to be something that was in the province of Genghis Khan, or Napoleon, or Barack Obama. But now it's in the province of any one of us in our fluffy bunny slippers. Yes, I used that joke last time. I used that one a lot. Sorry. I'm not really that funny. We can launch gigantic online enterprises from our bedrooms on the cloud. We can launch massive logistic networks. We can leverage people all over the world through sites like Upwork.com or Amazon Turk. It is amazing what any of us can do right now. The entrepreneurial reach of the average person is incredible. But here's an interesting thing. Just because we can do it, interestingly, none of us are doing it. Me neither. Right now, I'm giving you a talk. What I'm not doing is launching a global empire using AWS and Foxconn factories in China and, oh, what the hell, maybe a mercenary army. You can probably hire mercenaries as well on the dark web. You can do all sorts of stuff. But I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. Not today. And the reason is, one of the reasons is, I actually don't know what to do. If I did that, I'd probably waste all my money. Yeah? It's a bit like any of us could conceivably become millionaires, maybe even billionaires overnight, just by investing in futures. You could literally become a billionaire overnight if you made some effective futures trades. I'm pretty certain you could. But I'm also pretty certain you won't make those trades. I'm also pretty certain that you only need a few attempts before you lose all your money and then some. So we're living in a world where being able to do stuff it's at everyone's fingertips, but we don't dare touch it because we don't know what to do, and no one else does either. Knowing what to do, knowing how to leverage all of these powers is becoming much more important than making things happen. Making things happen is an app. Knowing what to do is magic. So we're moving to a world where the execution side of being an executive is being downplayed. I actually think the word executive will change, because at the moment we define important person in the organization by their ability to make things happen. I actually think more and more we're going to be impressed by not their ability to make it happen, which can be automated, relegated, deferred, etc., but their ability to decide what to make happen. And we're talking about a world where everybody needs to be making these decisions, and everybody has access to weapons of mass construction. Let's call them, maybe that's my new buzzword for the day. We have access to weapons of mass construction. We have access to incredibly powerful tools, all of us. But and whether as private citizens, as entrepreneurs, or as employees of large corporates, as most of you are, we have access to all of these tools, but we dare not touch them because we don't know what to do with them. On the other hand, those people who do know what to do with them are the ones who are going to win bigly. Well, that's a new book by Scott Adams, and yeah, those of you who know the reference of the word bigly, well, by the way, I'm thinking of maybe calling the podcast Bigly Data. Like it? Yes. So Bigly Data is another. What do you think, Mark? You're so diplomatic. um, so this whole thing of knowing what to do is key. Making a good decision is key. And in a world where you have competitors you haven't even heard of. The whole world is competing with you. People who never had access to the ability, the barriers of entry to competing with you are falling. Just like suddenly you can do things you couldn't do before, so can everyone else. And instead of competing with, New South Wales or Australia or the Western world, you're competing with the entire globe. And more people are coming online, and more people have access to these weapons of mass creation. Yeah, let's call them weapons of mass creation. Weapons of wealth creation, really. More and more people have access to this, and everybody is faced with this ever-growing and critical challenge of making good decisions. And by the way, there are winners and there are losers. There are lots of losers in this game. I don't know that I need to work too hard to convince you that the modern economy, well, there is net growth, yes, but it's not all win-win. There are winners and losers in every industry. In fact, as you know, in the tech sector, there's always one player who wins bigly, and everyone else almost needn't bother. That's certainly the way the tech sector seems to be working. So if in a world where making decisions is really important, well, you want to make good decisions. You want to make the best possible decision you can. And what does that mean? Well, let's philosophy, first principles. To make a good decision, you want to use all available information in the most efficient way. Agreed? Right. And it turns out that these days, most of the available information is in electronic form. That's the data, yeah? And we have not just data, but we have a range of very sophisticated reasoning techniques to reason about that data in the most effective way. So data without good reasoning is useless, just like reasoning without good data is useless. You need both. And the thing about good reasoning is a lot of it happens in human brains, and some of it we can automate. Some of it. Now, when we automate the entire reasoning process to the point of decision, that's what we use a lot of AI for in the service sector. But here's the good news. It's pretty trivial. It's pretty boring. When we use AI, we used to call it machine learning. It's been around for about 25, 30 years. It used to be called regression modeling, really. It's not that exciting, and it really replaces or supports very, very low-level decisions. It's not going to make a CEO obsolete. It's not even going to make a middle manager obsolete. What it's going to do is augment someone in a call center, or replace an underwriting clerk, or probably not even replace, but augment the decision-making of an underwriting clerk. So yeah, I wouldn't get too excited about AI in the white-collar economy for quite a while. If anybody thinks that speech recognition and vision is the most exciting thing in AI in the white-collar world, you're not paying attention. That's not where the valuable applications are. It's there, it's very trivial, and yeah, there are some people who have jobs in that space, and most people don't. And if you want to work in that, you don't just have to be capable, you have to be bloody awesome. Oh, this is the other thing. You want to be a data scientist, you need to be bloody awesome. It's really easy to be a wannabe data scientist these days. Anyone can do an online course. Remember what I was saying? Everyone's got access to this stuff. It's great, right? But if everyone's got access to an online course, and the online course is structured so everyone can do it, because hey, the course wants all the clients to be happy. What do you think about that barrier to entry? And what do you think about demand in serious organizations? They're probably going to want something a bit more, like maybe a serious PhD and proven track record doing real things. Just a thought. You're going to have to excel. If you want to be a data scientist, you're going to have to excel. Just turning up is a good start, but there's more. Anyway, so where were we? We need to make good decisions. And we've got computers to help us, which is great. We've got computers to do some of the thinking for us. They kind of half digest the data. So in practice, there's only really one job left. This is my claim. There's only one job left in the future, which is only white-collar job left. And by the way, I consider IT to be a blue-collar job, increasingly. So there's only one white-collar job left, called making or supporting good critical decisions. That's the only job left, yeah? And with that being the only job left, what does that job look like? Well, that job is about collating and reasoning about and using computers to help you reason all available data. So that means, guess what that means? That means that everybody is a data analyst. And I don't mean data engineer, that's that outsourced, soon-to-be automated blue-collar side of things. I mean, well, some data engineering I think is still going to matter. There's still going to be data engineering around, but a white-collar job, certainly a management job, will be about inferring insights from data in the service of making good decisions, because if you don't, the organization goes down. That's the future. So, we're talking about a future where everybody needs to be able to do the jobs that computers can't do, to help the computers, to go one step further past what computers can do, which, hey, isn't much and probably won't be much for quite a while. Yeah, AI is a big disappointment, actually, compared to the hype. I can talk about that if you want. But what's left, like I said, is everyone is in the analytics game. It's the only white-collar game in town. Everyone is supporting on making decisions. Now, does this mean that everyone's a data scientist? No. Does this mean that we don't have whatever it is that we call data scientists anymore, who may have another name, who may be multi-streamed and specialized? Doesn't mean that either. What it means is that for most people in the white-collar world, and a lot of people in IT, okay, so there are people in this room who fancy themselves savvy with data, but I'm telling you, they're savvy with data the way lab technicians are savvy with science. There are people in this room who know how to pump data around machines, but they don't know how to talk to the data. And talking to the data is going to be the only skill in town, yeah? Not pumping it through a machine. We're going to pump data through a machine, but that's not going to be the high skill. We're talking about a future where everybody is going to need, well, ubiquitously, a general non-specialist skill set, and quite a significant skill set. And I call this skill set data literacy. And I claim that in the future, this is going to be a minimal skill set that you will require to participate in the economy, to be economically productive. Now, I want to draw an analogy. So the best way for me to motivate you to think about this, before I haven't even gotten into the details of what the skill set is, and by the way, it's knowledge, it's skills, it's a mindset, and it's actually even a personality type. It's a lot of things. But before I get into that, I want to, by analogy, discuss computer literacy. Okay, so what the hell does Eugene mean by data literacy? Let's step away from that for a while. Let's talk about computer literacy. Everybody in the room knows what computer literacy is, and everybody in the room is non-trivially computer literate. Now, some of you are IT specialists, and many of you are not. But you're all computer literate, and those of you with kids, your kids are computer literate. Hell, my 3-year-old is more computer literate than I was at the age of 15. Seriously. I'm pretty old. There is no such thing as a computer illiterate member of the middle class now, of a white-collar professional now. You cannot be a professional these days and not be massively non-trivially computer literate. So I want you, something you may not realize is all of your seemingly trivial, seemingly ubiquitous skills, you know, browsing, using a mouse pointer, you know, using your phone, using various apps, word processing, spreadsheets, editing photos, all that stuff. The amount of knowledge that you have relating to operating computer technology far exceeds that of a computer professional in the 1980s. Not the type of knowledge, but the volume of knowledge. And if not exceeds, at least it's comparable. At least we can have the debate. It's not inconceivable that we can have a debate whether it exceeds it or not. You all have an enormous amount of non-specialized knowledge. Now, some of you are specialists. Some of you can code. We still think of, well, coding, that's specialist stuff, serious sort of engineering and other geekery, that's serious stuff. But just being computer literate, being able to use your phone, as someone over there is doing, and as are you, just being able to use your phone, just being able to swipe and do all that stuff, you know, we don't even think of that as a skill anymore, but that is a massive skill set. And 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, you still heard stories about often very senior managers who couldn't do the most basic things like send an email. You don't hear those stories anymore because those people are no longer working. You just do not have people like that in the workplace anymore. If you want to be in the modern professional workforce, you are massively and non-trivially computer literate. And that's everybody. And by the way, it's not just the workforce, it's primary school kids. Yeah? I mean, for my nephew, there's my 9-year-old nephew who's learning Python at the moment. The amount of non-trivial knowledge is incredible, and you need it just to turn up, just to be relevant. And my point is that there is a revolution in literacy that is inevitable, that is started barely, and in most places it hasn't hit at all. And it's a data literacy revolution. Now I'll make another point. The amount of waste in data analytics is frightening. Like I said, the vanity metrics of how much money is spent, how many people are hired, how many organizations, how many business units, blah, 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 these are vanity metrics. If you actually talk to people honestly, and I have the privilege of talking to a lot of people, I don't have to name names, but you know, I've been around a lot. There's a lot of dissatisfaction out there. There's a lot of lack of understanding. And what is ubiquitously the case is you have people with absolutely no idea in charge of very unhappy data scientists. This is almost like more a rule than the exception in large organizations. And what's more, it's not people, the people in charge aren't saying, oh my God, I don't understand data science. I'm feeling a bit insecure. No, they're not saying that at all. They're saying, I'm in charge. I don't need to understand this stuff. It's all technical. I don't need to know what the real KPIs are. They're not very curious. I don't need to know how to manage these people. I'm in charge. Yes. That seems to happen way too much. What is that? That is a radically data illiterate manager who's been put in that position by another radically illiterate manager all the way to the top. And by the way, you get a lot of CEOs who say, I am 100% supportive of the digital transformation of this organization. I am putting in $100 million into this transformation, of which a third is going into the data analytics and data science project. We are going to be a machine learning and AI-driven organization. We are going to make data-driven decisions. We are transforming. And then I'd say, CEO, how much data have you looked at last week? Huh? No. How much data have you personally used to make your very important CEO decisions last week? What? No. I'm asking you personally, the CEO, have you looked at a CEO dashboard to make CEO decisions? Don't be silly. That's just the dirty technical stuff. I'm a CEO. I don't touch data. But don't you make decisions? No. I'm a champion. My job is to inspire people. So your job isn't actually to make decisions. Talk to you later. That sounds like bad humor, but that is unfortunately at the core of most of the cheerleading that I see in a lot of organizations. There's a lot of I keep hearing about how enthusiastic senior management is about this stuff, but what I don't hear is that they're engaged. What I don't hear is that they see it as their business. And what I'm seeing is they're so radically data illiterate that they're not even aware that the only way to make data work is to engage with it. I'll give you another analogy. I gave you the computer literacy analogy. What do I mean by engagement? Here's a simple idea that most of you all look like a very healthy bunch, so here's something that most of you understand probably better than me. Going to the gym, yeah? Some of you, at least conceptually, understand the idea of a gym, yeah? Now, what if the CEO had as much of an inkling about gyms as they do about data science? I know this is weird, but work with me, yeah? And they've decided that gyms are very important for health, yeah? And therefore, you know, being very personally health conscious and personally invested in health, they're putting millions of dollars into buying a state-of-the-art gym for the organization, yeah? And then you go to them and you say, how's it going? How's your workout going? Workout? Well, have you been to the gym? No. Well, aren't you expecting to get healthier and better? Yes, we bought this amazing gym. I'm expecting to get really buff from a little. Yeah, but you know you have to go to the gym and work out. But that sounds terrible. That's really hard and it's a waste of my time. I'm really important. I paid $30 million. I could have got the $10 million gym, but surely with a $30 million gym, I don't have to go there. Yeah? But this is the attitude. Yes?
I'm thinking that this sounds a lot like what a friend of mine from Princeton said. All of the students there, their daddies bought them the $100,000 degree, so they didn't think they had to study. The fundamental thing is, if you go to any university, you get nothing more out of it than what you put into it. It's exactly the same thing. That's human nature. It's not CEO nature, it's human nature.
New rule, it's got to be a question. Not bad though. I don't have any friends from Princeton. Look, what I'm saying is, the thing about analytics, I'm sick of hearing about cheerleaders. Cheerleaders are not engaged. Engagement is not about paying a whole lot of money to make the horrible technical people go away. Engagement is about actually being a customer. Engagement is about realizing that if analytics isn't there to support really high-level decisions, it's got no purpose. And if the most important people in the organization aren't suffering more because they're suddenly having to think about more, then the analytics is wasted. By the way, analytics is not there to make your life easier. Analytics makes everyone's life harder, sometimes horrible. Does that sound bad? Sorry, it's there to make decisions better. Yeah? Analytics is not there to make life fun. And analytics is not there to passively buy and stand from a distance and go, look, there's my analytics, isn't it great? If the executives aren't personally engaged in, if they're not the prime customer of analytics, it's a disaster. But what I'm telling you is the reason we have massive disengagement. Now, many of you in this room will know what I'm talking about, because every time I talk to people who are data scientists, who are data analysts, who are business intelligence professionals of the kind that actually looks at data, not the kind that just generates reports automatically. If you're serious business intelligence professionals, if you're serious data scientists, you know what I'm talking about. You know what I mean by disengaged executives. And the problem is that those executives are radically data illiterate, which means that it doesn't matter how much the organization has invested in you with your wonderful education and all the other data scientists and analysts in the place. It doesn't matter how much expensive software you've bought. And by the way, the vendors will always tell you the software is the most important thing. Buy the great software and yeah, magic will happen. The magic won't happen unless the senior decision-making executives engage first. And the reason they don't engage is because they're radically data illiterate. So we're talking about a revolution that needs to happen to realize value from data, and one that in most places, especially in large corporates, hasn't happened yet. Now, it has already happened in a lot of smaller places. Like, it turns out that there's a talk I'm going to give on what the title I'm going to use is one from a very clever fellow called Eric Weinstein. And Eric Weinstein, no relation to the other Weinstein, Eric Weinstein has this idea of the unforgiving domain. What's the unforgiving domain? The unforgiving domain is any space where if you make a bad decision, you're gone. And you're not gone in 5 years, you're gone the next day. And there's no escaping the bad decision. What's that? Well, every single political party is in that space. Hedge fund, every single hedge fund is in that space. Every single sports team is in this space. So the unforgiving domain, you'll find the cultures and the level of data literacy in those sort of organizations is very different indeed. So what I'm talking about is not science fiction, it's just science fiction for large corporates. And even in some large corporates, it's better than others. And it is changing, because I can tell you now that globally, that term data literacy, you just do a Google Trend search, you'll see that it's going up. There are more and more organizations talking about it. The hashtag, I've been talking about data literacy for about 7 years now, but I thought I invented it. Probably didn't. I mean, other people have come up with it, but it's now in the common vernacular. There are now, you know, I don't like throwing around big articles. I don't like saying, look, important person said this. I don't think that's a good way to argue. But quite a few important people are saying this. So it is on a lot of organizations' radar. A lot of organizations, yes, up the back.
In the same way a technical person will translate to a non-technical stakeholder, why can't a technical, like a statistician or an analyst or a data scientist, translate to a non-technical person? Why is it necessary for all to have this technical domain? Because that's the same.
Okay, okay, so the question, okay, here's an analogy. Why do I need to learn to browse the internet? 1995. Why can't I get an IT expert to browse it for me? And people did. People did. Basically what you're asking is, okay, here's one reason. because you won't have your job anymore, because the person you're calling a technical person will have your job. Because that a data scientist is not a technical person. A data scientist is actually a strategist and an entrepreneur and a communicator usually. And more to the point, they have a lot of trouble communicating insights to you, because that's an important part of data literacy, is having the language to understand insights. Now, the usual dialogue is data scientists and analysts are terrible at communicating. That's a general trope, yeah? The thing is, data scientists are very painfully aware of that this is a trope, and they feel very bad about it, and they're doing things to fix it. You know, they're doing communications training. Some of them can communicate quite well, actually. But what I don't see is business going, maybe we don't understand the concepts no matter how simple the data scientists are making it. And sometimes the question is asked with, I'll give you an example. So here is a very common problem, and this, I think, this is a problem that launched me on my journey of obsession with data literacy. Forecasting. Very commonly in business, the stakeholders, clients, whatever, say, we want a forecast, give us the number. Give us the number. And my answer actually is, it's not a number, it's something called a probability distribution, which to you probably sounds like blah, 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 technical gobbledygook, blah, 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 right? And maybe if it doesn't, fantastic, but to a lot of stakeholders it does. They don't want to hear the word probability distribution. They want the answer to their question. I asked you for the number, give me the damn number, right? And the reality is that I could tell you that the expected temperature, let's say we're forecasting the weather, the expected temperature tomorrow is 27.4 degrees. But the thing is, I can almost guarantee you, I'll bet with a very large odds that it won't be 27.4 degrees. In other words, the number is meaningless. What's meaningless is the relative probability of that distribution. And you can only solve that problem so much by addressing the communication side of the data scientist. The rest is the absorption capability of the decision maker. So if the decision maker cannot think probabilistically, they actually can't be an effect. It's a business problem. It's not a technical problem. The dividing line between what is technical and what is strategic and relevant is kind of artificial and drawn far too close to what is actually business relevant. So to make good business decisions under uncertainty, you need to understand probability distributions, and most business clients, in my experience, still don't. Now, I don't know that having someone sort of dumb it down and explain it and sort of invent oversimplifications every time is an effective solution. What is more likely is that people who can think in those terms are going to have those jobs, and people who can't will find themselves out of jobs. I don't think you like my answer, but that's my answer.
I think there's probably the supply and demand's a little off there. There's probably more jobs than there are data scientists to fill them, and also data scientists have a finite amount of time, and if they allocate it to managing teams, then they have less time to actually do.
Okay, you're making it sound like we're in a healthy situation. We're not. We're in an insane situation. Like I just told you, in my opinion, it's a joke. It's not an industry, it's a joke. It's all for show. Most of the supposed data science out there isn't done for any good purpose whatsoever. It's being managed by people who have, frankly, no business and no right managing this. And it doesn't matter because there is a lack of oversight all the way to the board, in my opinion, in a lot of organizations. Now, when you have a situation that is that radically dysfunctional, we can talk about supply and demand all you want. My claim is it's temporary. And I'm not talking about the way it is now or even the way it'll be next year. This is a process that I think will take the better part of a decade, if not multiple decades. Does that make sense? Hey, Birchall, thanks for coming. Yes, Demeter.
Just to support, we already live with that. They say lies, statistics. What's missing in that is as used by politicians.
Okay, remember my rule?
The problem is not statistics, it's who interprets the statistics.
Okay, talk to Mark about doing your own talks. I'm serious, people. Questions are welcome. Statement. You can do everyone, if you got a statement after I finish. Okay, and I'm sorry to do this, but it's because I get distracted. When people make statements, I go, oh, do we have to do this? If you ask a good question, I'll go, yes, and I can bounce off it. Is that all right? Just write down all the statements you want to make. Questions are welcome. And thank you for a question. What's your name, by the way?
Sam.
Thank you, Sam. So yeah, and this is an important point. We're not talking about, in my opinion, a stable or normal state of affairs. We're talking about a very anomalous situation. I actually also think that, particularly in Australia and for much of the Western world, this so-called analytics revolution has coincided with a period of unprecedented affluence. And here's the thing, when do you need good decision making? When you're in shit. You need good decision making when you're in real trouble. And the places that are spending enormous amounts of analytics are, oddly enough, not in big trouble. They're not the ones desperately in need of good decisions. They're not in that unforgiving space that I've been talking about. Interestingly, some organizations are. So I'd like to draw a distinction between the pressures, incentives, and resulting cultures of a lot of corporates versus what I'd call the unforgiving companies. And, you know, a nice cleansing economic crisis should take care of it all. I would say that this literacy thing it's coming. Well, first of all, it's desperately necessary for most of the people in this room to have a more satisfying career. Secondly, it's desperately necessary for actual, you know, social good, economic growth, well-being, for organizations to actually deliver massively the value that all this wonderful technology we've developed actually promises. Because so far everyone complains that the value of analytics is at best incremental. Well, hello, what a surprise when there's hardly any literacy to receive the benefit. But I still believe that, and I see in some organizations, that the value of analytics in a literate organization really is orders of magnitude, really is exponential, really is truly transformative. I'm still in this field for that reason. So I sound like a horrible cynic. I'm not a cynic. I feel really bright about the future. I'm just a bit impatient with the present. I expect more, and I'm telling you what more is going to look like.
If I've got really bad management who is completely data illiterate, who you give them the report and they put on the top of the stack that they got last month, which you didn't read, how do I migrate that person to a state of data literacy?
Okay. You don't. They are more important than you.
Sorry?
They are more important than you. It's their home. You're a guest, they're the boss. You don't migrate them, they migrate you. Or you migrate yourself to another company.
Yeah, that was my...
No, but seriously, if there's one reason that people want to shoot me, and there's probably plenty, the one reason people want to shoot me is because people who work in corporate jobs in data science are always asking a version of this question. I haven't given a single talk or a single course where this very good and very heartfelt question has been asked, so thank you for asking it. But the thing about this question is, it presupposes something. It presupposes something called bottom-up change. It presupposes that the people who are, let's face it, not very well respected. Data scientists, I find, are far less well respected than they should be. Seriously. In fact, I find a lot of data scientists, for whatever reason, like people go, oh, there's a lot of churn of data scientists in our organization. I wonder why that is. We pay them so much money. And then I go, they're treated with a complete lack of dignity. What do you bloody expect? But the point is that there is this myth called bottom-up change. And people always say to me, well, how do I affect bottom-up change? And what I say to them is, you're probably staying in this job that's killing you slowly, and the only thing that's keeping you going there is the belief in bottom-up change. Let me kill that belief for you. Bottom-up change is a freaking joke. The only thing that works is top-down change, and top-down change only works when you don't have one of these standoffish, I'm a cheerleader, I'm really supportive of the data transformation, but I actually don't make any decisions on ever look at data because it's too technical. When you don't have those managers, when you have engaged managers who lead by example because they're addicted to data-driven decision-making, because it's the only way their career is built and it's the only way they survive day to day and help the organization survive with them. Only in those situations do you get change. if you're at the bottom rung of the status hierarchy of an organization, and it pays to be very honest with yourself about this, do you really think you can affect change? Now, another point. The question is usually couched as, how do I make them understand? Often, it's not about them understanding. Often, it's about their incentives. Often, it's, why should they care about this data? Because the reality is, they probably don't need to make good decisions. Remember what I was telling you about a time of affluence, time of plenty, versus the unforgiving space? In the unforgiving space, everybody in the organization is hungry for data, for insights. Everybody needs to make good decisions or else, like in a hedge fund. But, and if everybody isn't pulling their weight to make good decisions, bad things happen. You know, the wrong person gets elected, or the hedge fund collapses, or the sports team loses a game. Yeah? But the first question, if you do want to affect bottom-up change, the first question to ask is, does this person really have an incentive to make good decisions? I know it's my job to give them a report. Do they really need that report? Is it really just ignorance, or incentives are more important than understanding? If people have the right incentives, they'll have the incentive to learn what's needed. So, yeah, I'd say most people see it. Most people think it's a problem of understanding. It's not. It's a problem of incentive. And most people believe in bottom-up change, and it's a fairy tale like Santa Claus. Let it go, and then see if you still want to work there.
I'll just rephrase what you said. Give the report to the manager's manager, and then see if bottom-down change happens, top-down change happens.
One of the reasons I haven't been in a large organisation for 12 years is because I'm completely politics clueless. I don't know if that's suicide or not. I'm sure there are other people in the room. Yeah. Okay. Well, I think there are much more constructive ways to leave. But yeah, I actually have another talk that's on video that's called Questions to Ask Your Prospective Employer, which is another point. Most of the issues that people find in the work they have as data analysts are issues they should have addressed at the interview, because it either would have meant they won't take the job, or it means that they would have framed the job in favorable terms, so they don't get squashed into this disrespected, irrelevant, and badly led and supported role. I'm going way off topic here, but it's kind of way off topic, but the issues I'm addressing now are all symptoms of chronic endemic data illiteracy, where the amount of data illiteracy seems to increase, not decrease, as you go up the hierarchy, which is not so much an unpleasant thing as a total and utter tragedy. I am, however, still very bullish because, as I said, there is this growing unforgiving space, and there are more and more ways in which organizations can be in that space. It's growing. Some of them are competing with the large corporates. Some of them are winning. I'm bullish on data science. I'm bullish on analytics, and I'm bullish on data literacy. This stuff is coming for Darwinian reasons. So what's left is, I guess, to talk about what the heck data literacy is. So to me, it's a bag of skills, and it's more than skills. It's actually, as I said, it's a work style. It's personality trait. It's a personality trait as well. And underlying it all, back to my conversation with Demeter, are the basics. Logic. Now, everyone thinks they're logical. Everyone. Yeah. Now, those of you who are logical will probably know that you're surrounded by people who aren't logical, and you know several things. One, there's an old movie called The Sixth Sense. Who's seen The Sixth Sense? Right, it's a very old movie, and it's a kid who sees ghosts. He says, "I see dead people. They don't know they're dead." Well, the thing about illogical people is they don't know they're illogical, and you can't use logic to prove to an illogical person that they're illogical. It's also very bad manners. It's a personal affront to say to someone that they're illogical. But the reality is that most people in the white-collar world are tragically, radically illogical. And guess what? The underlying skill of data, the skill underlying data literacy is serious, formal, rigorous logic. And it goes beyond logic. It actually goes to analytic philosophy. It actually be understanding argument styles, understanding when you are arguing badly or someone's arguing badly to you. Because I see bad arguments, bad philosophy being done in business all the time. In fact, your point about the data philosopher, I had two reactions. One was, I don't think that name will sell, Demeter. But my other reaction was, I really wish every organization had one. And I've been talking about this for a long time. My dream, and I was talking about it last time actually, is an audit function that's basically a data philosopher function. Someone to be a judge that says, well, actually 1 and 1 is 2, so you're right and you're wrong. I'd love that. I don't know how realistic that is. I think so I'm not promising you that one, but I am promising ubiquitous data literacy in the professional world tomorrow, just like there's ubiquitous computer literacy today. But yeah, underlying it is logic and an understanding of what we now call philosophy, which students of philosophy study, students of economics study as well, and just about no one else does. People who study law think they study it, they mostly don't. And everybody else thinks philosophy is, I don't know, esoteric religious mumbo-jumbo. And some of the philosophy taught at universities is esoteric pseudo-religious mumbo-jumbo as well. But I digress. Serious, boring, but very necessary logic, philosophy, analytic philosophy, just structural thinking, rationality, being a rational person, being a curious, skeptical, systematic, rational person is the bedrock skill here. But there's more. There's more. There's an ethic as well. So something I haven't mentioned ever in this talk. Everyone wants to talk about ethics. Everyone's obsessed with ethics in AI, right? And everyone goes, oh, what about bias in AI? Well, let's not go there now. But let's just say that if you're worried about bias in AI, the ethic I'm talking about now needs to be taken care of explicitly, thoroughly, and first. Otherwise, whatever other ethic you're worried about, be it privacy, be it fairness, be it bias, whatever, kind of gets gamed. It's irrelevant, and very, very bad people present themselves as champions. Oh, heads up, some really bad people can be champions of things that appear to be very good. They're actually very good at grabbing those positions. Just be careful. I'm not saying they're all bad. I'm not saying most of them are bad, but I'm saying be careful. And one way to be careful is to have an ethic of truth and reason. And this is something else I don't see in organizations. And this relates to the data philosophy point. An ethic that says logic, truth comes first. An ethic that says we're going to make a decision and then we're going to look for data-driven justifications for that decision is an unethical thing to do. An ethic that says if someone's arguing badly and using their authority to keep everyone quiet, that's a bad thing as well. It's unethical not to speak up against it. That's the ethic I would like to see. So on the one hand, the skill of logic, the skill of working with truth to derive non-obvious truth, and the other is an ethic of actually valuing that truth, enshrining and protecting that truth. Now, beyond that, I guess, is a personality style. It's exploration. And this is very frightening to a lot of people, especially people in IT. IT people spend their whole lives building stuff. What's building stuff? Building stuff is, there's an idea. Maybe you have it, maybe someone else has it, you know, you get a spec, there's an idea. And your job is to reliably, to spec, achieve that idea, yeah? It's entirely deterministic. Now, you go, hey, what about Agile? Okay, fine, Agile, whatever. Agile is a little bit is a bit more fuzzy, and I can say a lot about Agile later, but the point is, the end point is still deterministic. Agile doesn't say you get to make up what the spec is. Agile just says you get to make up how you get there. Also, generally speaking, Agile or not, uncertainty uncertainty is not welcome. Uncertainty is we've got a bug. Uncertainty is never a good thing when you're an engineer. However, if you're a data scientist, if you're an analyst of any kind, uncertainty is why you're doing what you're doing. You'll never do the same thing twice. You'll never know what you're going to do. Life is always surprising. You're always having to be creative. There are never any guarantees. You can never make promises. And this is really bad, by the way. As a consultant in analytics, the inability to make promises is my biggest challenge. Because people say, all right, what are the deliverables? I don't know. I'm just going to look at your data. I don't even know what you want from your business yet. I don't think you know either. I've actually had this conversation with a client recently. I said, let's agree that I don't understand your business. Let's agree that from an analytics perspective, you don't understand your business. All I can offer is to help you explore it. Oh, really? Yes. We're going to do a whole bunch of sprints. We're going to do them low-key, pretty fast, and maybe one of them will succeed. But the objective isn't to succeed. The objective is to find out more about the organization, find out about your real objectives, uncover a few of the, I guess, taboos, preferences, objectives of the organization, because, you know, what you've got there on this paper looks great, but I've never seen this level of spec face the truth well. And they go, okay, that sounds great, Eugene. it is actually the case that the ability to explore is a key skill, not just for the expert, but for the whole group. And when you're exploring as an effective data scientist, you're not doing it alone. You're taking your stakeholders on a journey with you. They are exploring with you. You're helping them explore. You're exploring their organization, and they're discovering things that they should know and don't, because it's only when you turn up as a data scientist, you're probably the first person who's thought in a very crisp and methodical way about their organization. You're not writing code, but you're doing that conceptual thing of breaking the problem, the reality up into meaningful chunks and systems that you would do if you were writing code. So that's a superpower, and it's a superpower that the managers of tomorrow need as well. So this is the exploration thing and the uncertainty thing. So you need to be comfortable with uncertainty. You need to know how to be playful. And in a serious way. So when I say playful, I don't mean meaninglessly playful like a kid, like my 3-year-old. I mean playful but entrepreneurial. Playful but serious. Playful but with a business objective. So your objectives are business objectives, but your processes, well, you don't do processes anymore. You don't know what you're going to do next. You do whatever it takes. You improvise. Now there are more serious things. There is also the language of data. Data speaks language. This is to Sam's question now. Data speaks a language. Data naturally speaks a language. It has concepts. It has a story to tell. But you know how everyone's talking about a storytelling right now? In my opinion, transitory bullshit. Data doesn't tell stories. Data talks in concepts of structure and uncertainty. It's not a narrative, it's structure and uncertainty. And what does that mean? That means that if you don't understand statistics, and I mean intimately, not I've passed a course in it in first grade uni, I mean if you don't intimately understand statistics the way you intimately understand how to use a word processor, if you don't have a feeling for statistics, for the key concepts of statistics, you can't talk to data. Because, look, statistics is just two things. Statistics is the language we use to describe and quantify uncertainty, and describe and quantify structure, and the way the two come together. But out of that come all the insights and all the decision support. It is an essential language, and I don't mean that everyone needs to go off and do a Masters of Stats, although just about everybody who wants to be a data scientist, I think, needs to have about a master's level knowledge of statistics. But I think people need to be comfortable with probability distributions and multivariable spaces, just to play, just on the business side, to make decisions on the business side. So that is not a technical skill anymore. Now I'll give you another analogy. 5,000 years ago in ancient Sumer, serious business people didn't know how to read or write. No, that was the IT people, the scribes did that, right? Serious business people don't bother themselves with technical things like reading and writing. 4,000 years ago in ancient Egypt, serious business people didn't worry themselves with arithmetic and geometry when they were measuring, you know, how much tax had to be paid during the periodic flooding of the Nile, because, you know, you had technical experts do that stuff. Can you imagine a serious business person being arithmetically innumerate and illiterate now and still be a functional business person? It's impossible. It's laughable, right? So if you're looking at me like I'm some sort of weirdo when I say the business person of tomorrow will need to have core statistical concepts as business skills, as strategic decision-making skills, which they cannot outsource. And if they want to outsource them, they will be outcompeted by people who don't, because there is a difference between, to draw yet another analogy, there's a difference between me driving my car or you driving your car versus, well, we've got one expert who knows the rules of the road, you know, they've passed the ELS test, and there's me who knows how to turn the wheel and press the accelerator, and together we're going to drive the car. There is something that happens when essential things are in the same head. Having a technical expert and a business expert with 8 years of training each, in my experience, is nowhere near as good as having one expert who's had 2 years in both. There is something magical that happens when someone understands both the business domain and the technical domain simultaneously. And the distinction between technical and business is artificial. So this statistical skill, and beyond it, is just the ability to slice and dice data, the ability to just grab a data set and roll it up, roll it down. It's sort of active data curiosity. Right now, some people can do it reasonably well, most people can't. Right now, what I am seeing is people will want the most elementary thing, like just give me. We've got transactions by month. We've got transactions by day. Give me the monthly totals. That's something that someone who knows what they're doing can do in 30 seconds, right? But what I see is organizations systematically going to a completely different department that will give them that report in 2 days' time. People still do that, and that is inefficient and borderline insane. And I think those organizations will be outcompeted by people who can go, I can do a query, boom. Getting a query on your data to support your strategic decisions is a core business skill. Yes, Sam?
What would you recommend to inspire data literacy among friends, family, and colleagues, I guess, around us?
Do it or be irrelevant. Nothing. I don't have a positive story for you. It's all stick. There's no carrot. It's all stick. You can if people want to ignore it, they're making a bet about the future. But I would just give the argument I just did. And by the way, there was someone here, maybe they're not here today, in the last talk, who thought I was giving a shining utopian vision of the future. I wasn't. I was giving a horrible vision of the future. It's like, if you don't acquire these skills, you will be unsuitable for employment, in my opinion. Now, I could be wrong, and I'd like to hear the counter arguments, and you may have them. But I actually, I think the inspiration is this is what you just need to do to compete and to succeed. I guess the inspiring thing is the opportunity now is to acquire these skills before everyone else does, and to be a more effective manager of tomorrow and outcompete a lot of managers who are going to be intransigent, because a lot of people are. So yeah, everything that makes the people you want to convince intransigent makes everyone else intransigent as well. And the fact that other people are intransigent, just like people don't want to do a master's in stats, yeah? A master's in stats sounds daunting, but if you're going to actually go and do a master's in stats, just remember you're going to be part of a very select elite. You're going to be a real data scientist and not a pretend one, because everybody else thinks it's too hard. That's the most inspiring thing I can say, I'm afraid. The other thing, the third thing, and it's more philosophy, Demeter. It's another part of philosophy. It's a weird little bit of philosophy that we call science. It's the philosophy of cause and effect. It's understanding what experiments are. Not just because you want to run an experiment, but sometimes you can't run an experiment. But science is what lets you understand not just what's in your data, but also understand the holes in your data. So when you have a scientific understanding, science goes beyond simple logic. Science goes beyond statistics. You know how people say correlation doesn't imply causation? All of statistics is about correlation. Statistics alone is not about causation. You need scientific training to understand how to construct experiments, whether you need experiments, or what to do when you can't run an experiment. And heads up, the most important decisions to be made in the organization are sort of decisions the CEO makes. First of all, they're causal decisions. It's like, I want to do this, and I want to make damn sure that this happens, or I want to have the greatest likelihood this happens. They're actually implicitly thinking about causality. And guess what? You can't do experiments on the CEO's decisions. The CEO's decisions are very big, very infrequent, and all very different than one another. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't think scientifically about them. Indeed, there's Birchall over there, who's a very talented econometrician. And by the way, econometricians are extremely valuable people, because econometricians spent their whole lives asking, how do we make big decisions scientifically when we can't run experiments? Because there's only one Australia, and we can only move its interest rate one way. But how do we use all the data we can in the most systematic, skeptical, and scientific way? So, bet you didn't know that. For a long time I thought, econometricians, they're just people with economics degrees who do time series. Later I found out that econometricians are absolute gods, because they can do non-experimental causal impact, which is about as heavy as data science gets. Now, I'm not saying you want to go out there and become an expert in non-experimental causal impact, but you do need to know what non-experimental causal impact is. Just like with data literacy, you don't need to know how to build a predictive model, but you do need to know how to assess one, or you at least need to know what one is for. You certainly need to know that it's not a matter of having one or not having one, it's a matter of how accurate is it, and how that accuracy relates to value. And I say that because most stakeholders, most customers, most managers of machine learning functions that I come across don't know this at all, or don't know this well enough. That's pretty much a very quick rundown of what I consider to be the core components of data literacy. of why data literacy is on the one hand necessary, on the other hand inevitable, and finally why we're in this very strange and very unnatural transition state. So if you're looking at maybe building a data science career, I would be very skeptical of the times we're in now. Again, I have my own, I'm making my bets on this data literacy stuff. I could be wrong. And if you think I'm wrong, please tell me why. Because the only way I learn is by people disagreeing with me, although I'm pretty scary. Look, if you tell me why I'm wrong, I'm very interested, and I may be wrong. But it seems to me that this is the future, and also it's not just the future, it's the present in the unforgiving space. For those organizations where outcomes are catastrophic, immediate, never present, and you can't politicize the outcomes away. Someone is to blame. So I'm now past the reading of my Mac notes, and in the rambling stage, I could return to the heading, to the various possible names for my podcast. But perhaps what's more valuable is for those of you who've been saving up statements under the guise of questions, please.
You mentioned logic and analytics philosophy. Is
Yes.
there a way to learn logic, or do you recommend actually learning, understanding what logic is, or is that coming? Does that come from learning statistics?
Generally speaking, if you learn formal statistics, you acquire a lot of that as part of it. I think there's still value in just formally learning logic if you can, which you can. You know, you can learn symbolic logic. In fact, interestingly, the one thing that a computer science degree tends to give you quite abundantly is formal logic. I find that the logic level is where IT people are great. I find, however, that one of the most surprisingly and radically data illiterate groups of people that I come across in organizations is actually IT. Like all these BI people who, they think they know data, but it's a bit like, you know, lab technicians thinking they know biology. They actually never look at data, they just pump it through machines. But their logic is really good. What they don't have is stats or experimentation. Does that make sense? Yes?
What do you think the Gartner and the hype curve that they come up with, do you think that's causing managers to make bad decisions about data and big analytics?
Okay, well, one thing, whenever people mention a large organization, I always have something nice to say about them. The nice thing I have to say about them is they have great sales and great marketing. I think that implies a whole lot of other things as well. Beyond that, I'm sure the higher you go into the organization, the more influential organizations like Gartner are. I think there are forces other than analysts, however, also shaping the environment. And I also think that the more innovative an organization is, truly innovative, the less it uses the word innovation, the less it's likely it is to have an innovation manager, and the less interested it would be on where the hype cycle is. I actually think that if Fish ran an organization, they wouldn't have a Department of Water. And innovative organizations don't have a Department of Innovation, if that makes sense. However, I think that there's any number of reports from any number of big name organizations flying around all the time. And this is without me commenting on their value. I haven't said anything about whether they're any good or not. I'm merely saying that some organizations don't pay attention to them at all. Many do. I don't know if that answered your question. Yes?
Is there a case study where a company's actually transformed after going through a couple of bad sessions that I don't know if you're involved in, with a journey trying to become more curious? And
I can make one up.
you don't know one.
Look, okay, let's get dark for a minute. Here's something I haven't guaranteed you. I haven't given you any guarantee that it's possible to truly transform an organization to be data oriented and data literate. Let's just say I'm not convinced that you can't. And let's just say that the effective case studies are somewhere between 0 and not many. Let's also say that there is a lot of bias here. What's the bias? A friend of mine once said to me, "Hey Eugene, did you hear about how Bank blah did this really cool thing with cluster analysis method blah, and they presented at conference blah?" And I said, I had no idea that conference was on. I had no idea they were doing that, but I know one thing about that whole activity. He goes, yeah, what? I know that that bank so undervalued that particular piece of work that they were quite happy for it to be presented publicly. The bias is, the more serious an organization is about this stuff, the more secretive it is. You know why they call it business intelligence? That's not intelligence in the artificial intelligence sense, in the IQ sense. It's intelligence in the James Bond sense. Intelligence is the thing that helps you make better decisions. Now, I'll draw an analogy here with a particular enterprise. I probably shouldn't even tell you what industry they're in, but they're in the unforgiving domain, where people actually sign contracts. Basically, they can't even say where they're working. The place has an office where, you know, the door is just blank. They don't want any publicity. They don't want any attention. They're not going to tell you what they're doing. The most effective organizations are the most quiet. The more people brag, the less they've got to hold back, which biases the ability to answer your question effectively. Does that make sense?
But there are some big companies.
Okay, but your question was difficult. Your question wasn't, are there successful companies? Absolutely there are. Your question was, have there been successfully transformed companies that went from having the usual kind of culture and transformed to the other kind? I'll be honest with you, the jury's out. I've certainly seen incremental improvements. I think the reason I get to hedge my answer is because I think the more serious transformations have started very recently. They're certainly hitting a whole lot of uncertainty and impediments and turbulence. It's taking a long time. I am seeing some lasting results, but what I haven't seen is a full end-to-end change in a large organization where it started as any other large organization and ended as if it's in the unforgiving domain. Does that answer your question? There was a, yes.
So sometimes the top manager thinks that the data is all good, but it is not relevant to the decision that
And he's absolutely right. That's true. That can happen.
Often they might be right in certain cases. So I'm not sure if one should think about that as data illiteracy, and because they may go one step further and say it's almost always irrelevant, so I don't even want to.
Okay, look, your question is a very good question. My course, Data-Driven Decision Making, goes right to this question. Now, the reality is that if you want to support the decision of an underwriting clerk, we have lots and lots and lots of cases of underwriting decisions and their outcomes. So we have a training set to train an AI model, so we can actually automate that whole thing away, yeah? And if you want to make operational decisions about the workings of a sales team, you can use operational dashboards, you can slice and dice, and you can make certain decisions about who's performing well, who's not performing well, where the biggest changes were, right? When you get to the sort of decisions that a CEO makes, notice how even in the second place, that operational dashboard was less immediately relevant to the decision, and it needed human input than the full AI model. When you get to the executive decision, the executive's absolutely right. There's tangential evidence, but let's say you're looking at entering a new market, or you're looking at just maybe acquiring a company, or you're looking at maybe refinancing in some complex way. There is absolutely what you don't have is a bank of exactly the same kinds of decisions and their success. You don't have that. You have maybe kind of sort of relevant decision, and everybody's struggling to find relevance. But guess what? It turns out that you can use the same kind of rigor, the same kind of probabilistic thinking, the same kind of empiricism to structure, measure, and assess that decision. And you can extract the data that's in that CEO's head and actually assess that CEO's decision-making capability. That's, okay, there's a talk I've also got a video of, which is called Strategic Decision Making. So maybe those of you who are interested, I'm sure you can get in touch with me. I'm the principal organizer of this meetup. My name's the one that's bold, Eugene Dubossarsky. Just click on it, Google me. I'm not that hard to find. If you want the presentation you'd care about is my strategic decision making presentation, which is precisely about this. The most relevant data is in the CEO's head, but that's not an excuse to be completely undisciplined about it. There is a way to be much more disciplined and, as a side effect, find the actual best strategic minds in the organization. That's a story for another day, and there's a video. The other one you may want to see, and this is probably relevant to quite a few people in the room, is questions to ask your prospective employer. I think that's a must in your next job interview. It's probably quite useful in your next performance review, because wherever you're in a situation to possibly reset expectations, express your misgivings, and actually turn the tables and ask probing questions of the other side. Don't be the victim. Don't be the person being asked questions. Don't be the one who has to account for themselves. Make the organization accountable to you. And I've got a video that might help you. But yeah, in terms of strategic decision making, yes, you're both right. The CEO is right, but you're right as well. There can be a lot more discipline. There can be data extracted, but the electronic data that's currently available is next to useless. Especially whenever you want to do a new thing, the available data is next to useless. But that doesn't mean that you can't use rigor, discipline, logic, statistics, and extract more meaningful data. In this case, from the very brains of the executive team and other stakeholders. Demeter.
All right, let me I'll make sure that the statement turns into a question. When you talk about
Last question. Thanks, Mark.
all these behavioral attributes of data literacy, governance, decision making, data ethics, are we talking about actually not getting data from the components, but actually interaction between the components, which is much richer set, which we don't usually store even properly, and to understand well, this is where the logic of systems thinking, which is a component of philosophy, comes, and this is where actually we are not really ready to accept, because we've been the moment in the Western world, we are in the dark ages of philosophy. We are suppressing logic by creating some sort of half-baked, excuses for why we act like this way, why not the way that is more ethical.
Demeter, I'm trying not to make fun of the philosophy that I know that you're into. Look, we all have our own favorite sub-disciplines of the field, right? I'm stepping back. I think we can agree that whatever logic and whatever toolkit of logic there is matters. You're probably more wedded to systems thinking than I am. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just not obsessed with it. But I think you'll agree with me that that's not the current battlefield. The current battlefield is a radical indifference to the very foundations of good thinking, and secondly, a completely cavalier disregard to the ethics of good thinking, the ethics of truth. Yeah? I hope you agree with me.